What's up guys, Sean here, and today we're going to talk about the resignation of Eric Schneiderman. Eric Schneiderman, the New York Attorney General, my Attorney General, recently resigned after 4 women came forward with allegations of physical abuse and domestic violence. Now, the reason I want to talk about this story is because there's a little bit of confusion about what Schneiderman is actually being accused of, and that's due to the association with the Me Too campaign. Eric Schneiderman is not being accused of a sexual assault or anything of that nature. In fact, many of the women involved have gone out of their way to make it clear that this was not like sexual roleplay gone wrong. Attorney General Schneiderman is being accused of being a physical abuser. He physically assaulted these women, and while some of these women's stories extend to actions in the bedroom, he physically assaulted these women outside of the bedroom. Now, it took Schneiderman about 3 hours after these allegations surfaced to resign, and that leads me to believe that this dude is probably guilty. He still maintains a carefully worded denial of these allegations, but there's 4 different not connected women with similar stories. Some are still too afraid to come forward. And the New Yorker, which published these allegations, is the same outlet that broke the Harvey Weinstein story. Now, there's a lot of different angles that you can approach this story on, but I think one of the most important things to do is point out how beloved Schneiderman was by the progressive left. For years, Schneiderman has been their guy, their champion. And literally, prior to these allegations, you had people like Samantha Bee claiming that Schneiderman was the hero that was going to save all of us from Donald Trump and all the evils of the conservative right wing.
Hero who stood up to democracy's nemesis before. Look up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's...
I'm Eric Schneiderman. With great power comes great responsibility.
Oh my God. He's...
Schneiderman does whatever a Schneider can. Only he can save us all.
And Eric's Justice League has challenged Trump over the first travel ban, pesticides, student loans, the second travel ban, smog, methane, Obamacare subsidies, DACA, the third travel ban, trans rights, the Clean Power Plan, and birth control access. Whew.
Now look, I'm not pointing all this stuff out just to beat up on people on the left. The reality is you don't really know who somebody is until you find out who somebody is. But there's something you notice about political leaders and leaders in general, and that's the tendency of these politicians who paint themselves as so pure and defenders of the weak tend to be the greatest victimizers. Schneiderman was the progressive guy, the guy to fight against Trump. He sued Airbnb in order to assert New York State's authority on short-term rentals. He sued ExxonMobil and other oil companies in order to virtue signal about climate change. He's gone after Wall Street, and as far back as 2013, he's been going after Trump. He's so progressive that other state attorney generals join in on his lawsuits and let his office take the lead. So when you see like a dozen states join in on a lawsuit about DACA or the travel ban, or any other progressive priority, the initiator of that lawsuit, more often than not, is the office of Eric Schneiderman, New York State Attorney General. It's him and his legal team that were doing the progressives' work against Trump. And all of that activity has provided him cover and like an aura of purity amongst progressives and the mainstream media. And all too often, it is that unquestioned purity, the bestowment of inherent virtue, that shields some of the worst monsters among us. And that's why it shouldn't surprise anybody that the same guy who went out of his way to sue Harvey Weinstein is a violent domestic abuser. That the person who claims the mantle of the resistance to the authoritarian tendencies of Donald Trump is somebody who has no problem with using the power of his office or threats of the power of his office to silence women who may speak out against him in the future. It shouldn't surprise anybody that the same guy who champions stronger penalties for choking people is choking women in his private life. Now, I'm going to touch on a little bit of the allegations against Schneiderman. I'm sure you've heard some of it already, but there are certain things that the articles written after the New Yorker piece are focusing on, and other things that are kind of being pushed to the side, and I honestly think a lot of that should be flipped. For instance, a lot of articles are focusing on the racial component of this. One of the women Schneiderman abused has a darker complexion, and he repeatedly demanded that she call him master, and beat her until she did. He would refer to her as a slave and basically called her and treated her like a piece of property. There's another story where he hit on a woman for the first time. She rejected him, and he responded by slapping her across the face. Now, according to the news article and the medical records at the time, this slap was so hard that it left a mark, and she was bleeding from her ear for days after. Now, these are very important aspects of the story, and I have no reason to doubt the fact that they are true. So to me, Schneiderman is a thug, he's a grade A scumbag, he's no better than any domestic abuser, and I'd like to see him go to jail. However, oftentimes the cover-up is worse than the crime, and what puts Schneiderman over the top for me is that cover-up. Schneiderman would repeatedly use the fact that he was the Attorney General to bully these women into silence. He told them that if they try to leave him, he could kill them. He could have their phones tapped. He could have them followed by the police. He would assert all the time that he is the law. And this wasn't taken as some talk or some playful banter. Two of the women were so terrified of Schneider that they actually informed multiple friends and family that if something were to happen to them, if they were to lose their life, that they believed that Eric Schneiderman was responsible. One of them actually wrote down a detailed account of the abuse and how much she feared for her life, put it in a safety deposit box, and gave the keys to her two closest friends, with the instructions that if she died or something serious happened to her, that they were to go to the safety deposit box and retrieve this handwritten account of the events. One of the women is a prominent New York attorney, and she decided to remain anonymous for obvious reasons. And according to her, when she told her other lawyer colleagues about Schneiderman's abuse, they advised her to stay quiet about Schneiderman. And the reason for that was that Schneiderman was deemed too progressive to lose. He was too good of a fighter against Donald Trump for him to be held accountable for his crimes. And that brings us to the final thought that I want to leave you with. If you see the world through the prism of Donald Trump, and you believe that somebody's virtue can be judged based solely on their level of resistance to Donald Trump, you're going to end up with more people like Eric Schneiderman. You're going to have more women abused by people in power, and you're going to have some genuinely awful people in your tent. Knowing somebody's outward political values does not give you any intimate knowledge of their personal values and behavior. And in the future, if you find yourself perfectly aligned with somebody on politics, try not to deify that person. You have to treat them with the same level of skepticism that you would somebody you completely disagree with. Because when you deify any person, especially if they're a political or religious or famous person, you're giving them greater cover to do horrible things. Anyway, that's all I really have for you guys today. Let me know what you think about Eric Schneiderman in the comments. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters, Louis Cool Dance, Mike Barbarossa, Pepe Loves Trump, Michael, Chelsea, and Apollo Legend. This has been me talking about Eric Schneiderman. Till next time.